You found a place to belong here in the circle of friends. I'm Beth, and I'm here with my friends today, and it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Missy, we're so glad to have you there, the quiet producer, but we love your quiet strength here in the studio. Gwen, Connie, what a joy to be spending the week with you. You're women that I just appreciate and admire, and I learn so much from both of you. I have learned and continue to learn from you. We've been looking at Luke, talking about the Sermon on the Mount, the woman with the blood issue. 12 years! 12 years! Wow. It's like first grade through high school. Yeah, that's how it can feel as a parent, too, sometimes. This is a long time of being stuck in this place. What can I do? What have you, here as we sit at the table today, what has jumped out at you from the past 2 days, Gwen, Connie, that you're like, oh, we didn't quite dig into that deeper. I want to go back and revisit that. Is there anything, any loose ends that we need to tie up?
You know, one thing I'm learning right now in this season is that when my reality does not match what God has promised, it's because there's a miracle coming or there's a finish coming that I can't foresee. I just think of Mary and Martha with the death of Lazarus. You know, I mean, Jesus was in another town. He gets word from one of the sisters that, you know, the brother is at the point of death, and he sends back I guess you could almost call it a cheery response compared to what we would expect. You know, he literally says, "Don't worry, this isn't a sickness unto death." And then their brother dies.
Dies, right.
And Jesus doesn't come right away. He stays 2 days longer where he is. I just, in my humanity, I would not have greeted him as kindly as Mary and Martha did, because I would have been furious. Especially him claiming to be who he was claiming to be. And then to literally have him just cry, I'm sorry, I wouldn't have had as much, I've been like, I'm grateful for your tears and your grief, but seriously, but then they couldn't see the resurrection coming. That was nowhere in what they thought was realms of possibilities. And so, like, I think a lot of times when we walk through those dark valleys, God's solution, if we're seeking his face, is in a realm of possibility that we can't imagine.
And the time factor.
Yeah.
What is a year, 2 years, 12 years as she hemorrhages? How time for us is not God's time. It's not Jesus' time. And how we sometimes want that. We want it tomorrow. We want it now. But that's not what God's plan is for us.
I don't know about you ladies, but he always seems to be late on my timeline.
Well, let's get back to that word yield,
Yeah.
right? So when we see a yield
Absolutely.
on the road, that means we have to slow down a little, huh? We're not going speed limit anymore or faster.
And if he says wait, we sit down
That's right,
and we wait until he says, all right, you can go again.
right.
Yeah.
So that yield in our lives as followers of Christ, I believe, is a reminder to be aware. Be aware of what's going on, but trust God. And when he says move, move, be ready to merge. But until that time comes, we just have to trust him to make that opening, to make that way, to do what only he can do. But it doesn't mean pull the car over and stop and turn off the key. And it just means wait on his timing.
Absolutely.
Wait on his timing.
And it's surrendering your agenda for his, your plan, your pre-planning,
Right.
whatever that looks like.
Where my mind has gone with all that we've talked about in what faith looks like lived out. I mean, the Bible is very clear, where there is fruit, there is a live and active faith. And we read about being pruned, the dead stuff gets cut away. Ouch, thank you. But this all makes sense within a world of believers, right? This all makes sense here at this table. But let's face it, we're going to walk out that door, and not everyone we do life with recognizes the truth of God's word. Some have never heard it. Some have read it and don't want to believe it. Some have said, no, I've read it. I did believe it. No, I don't anymore because life didn't turn out the way I expected. We live life in a world that in a nation that was built on the Word of God, but in a world that is getting further and further away from the truth of His Word. So tell me, this fruit of the Spirit talk that we were talking about, this blessed are those who weep, you're going to be rewarded. That doesn't make sense in this world's economy, right? And how do you respond? With love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. How do you go into a cutthroat world and stay upright with a heart of humility? I mean, aren't we supposed to be out there doing life in the masses? And if somebody is beating me up, I know what the Word says. I know what the Word says. I know the Word says turn the other cheek. But this world doesn't play by these rules that I have open in front of me.
But Beth, that's what makes us stand out.
Oh.
When we live according to kingdom principles, according to how God has asked us to live, that's our light. That's how we shine. That's how we look different. That's when we are the aroma of Christ. Or we're the stench of death.
Right. And the aroma of Christ. I recall when my husband died and I was with a priest and I was screaming at him. And I was saying to the priest, this is not the way it's supposed to be. It's not the way it's supposed to be. And I fell on the floor and with tears, of course. But I recall that a lot afterwards. And I recall the strength of my mother and those around me to get past that point. And like you said, I could have easily fallen away, taken a different path, gone a different way. And there were times that I did, with anger, with resentment, with even a kind of a foregoing of Christ's word for a while. But I always found that I was drawn back into the light, into the way, into the path because of those around me, but also because of what I saw outside that. I didn't want to be part of that. I didn't want to be the part that becomes bitter and angry and harvest that. Our fruit would not have been the fruit that I wanted for my son, for myself, even at that point. And so I do see that part of that is persistence. Part of that is those around us not giving up, not selling us short and allowing us to fall into that abyss where darkness prevails.
Part of that was people coming alongside and loving you, even if they didn't agree with what you were saying, how you were reacting. They loved you through.
Right.
And they reminded you of truth.
And they held the hope when you didn't have any. I have a friend that's the theme when she's going through a hard time. So I will look at her and go, let me hold the hope for you. I know you can't see it. I know you can't even touch it right now. But trust me, let's get on the other side of this one. And the hope will come.
Yeah. There's a song, we sang it years ago, so it's an old song, and I'm sure none of you know it, but the song is Sheltering Trees. We all need sheltering trees, friends in our lives who get down on their knees and lift us up before the King of Kings. We all need sheltering trees. That is what your family was doing for you, Connie, in the midst of the storm that was knocking you to your knees. That's the privilege that we all have in doing for the one another's of life, but even more so, life in this fallen world. It's a call on our lives. There are some who don't realize they need a sheltering tree. We can be down on our knees, lifting them up before the King of Kings, even before they know the King of Kings. I guess I asked a rhetorical question, I believe, at the beginning of all this. Yes, I have my high school speech teacher sitting next to me. So there's a word I used, and she may say, no, Beth, you used that completely wrong. I knew the answer to the question that I was asking, but I wanted to get your take on it. Because I know, without a doubt, it is not about what's coming at me in this world I live in. Stuff's going to come at me, and it's going to come at me hard and fast, and it's not always going to be pain-free or comfortable or smell good, Life is going to come at me.
Messy and hard.
Messy. But it's what's in me that has to keep me moving in the right direction. And here's the thing. Unless we do life with that attitude of Christ, preaching the gospel wherever we go, without saying words, shining bright for him, how is anyone who has not had the privilege of being raised in the word, of hearing people speak truth with love into their lives, how are they going to know unless we are that love? We are that light. We do bear the fruit of the Spirit in those hard situations where in our flesh we don't feel loving, we don't feel joyful, we don't feel at peace. This is war, not peace. We don't feel like responding with kindness, and yet we know that's the call in our life. We don't want to yield. It's not fair. It's not right. It's okay to have those feelings and those emotions. And it's okay to tell those people in your life who love you well how you're feeling. But, to have them love us enough to know that even if we're not going to like that answer, they're still going to speak the truth to us, that's a treasured friend that you better hold close. I always say you can't fight a cancer that you don't know you have. Mm-hmm. And no doctor would do us any good if we had cancer. And he was unwilling to tell us because he didn't want to make us sad, mad, upset, whatever. We need those people in our lives, those sheltering trees who lift us up to the King of Kings. And when the King of Kings says, speak into their lives, they're willing to go to the hard places with us. We're so glad you're here at the table with us. You've found a place to belong here in the circle of friends.
It's there when I feel it, it's there when I don't. Your love, your love, your love, your love is gently surrounding and holding me close. Your love can heal my soul. Your love can heal my soul. Your love, your love, your love, your love can piece back together what's broken apart. Your love, your love, your love, your love can bring restoration and give a new start. Your love can change my heart. Your love can change my heart. Consume me with your love, Lord. Consume me with your love, Lord. Consume me
Welcome back. You found a place to belong here in the circle of friends. Lord, I just love being at the table with you guys. We've been talking about just living out our faith in a world that doesn't make sense. And it shouldn't make sense because it's not our home.
Right.
We should be living like aliens and strangers. We should be living a little bit like the Jews who were taken all the way to, in Jeremiah, they were taken all the way to Babylon. And they're told to live there, dwell, live life, have kids, marry, raise, do business and seek the welfare of your city. But it's not your home.
Right.
It's not their home. And so that's a picture of where we're supposed to be. I actually am doing a precept study, and our assignment for this week was to look at the word. To look at the word world. And how the Bible talks about the world and how we are not of the world and we are not to love the world. And it's a study on the book of 1 John. And so I'm going to open us by going to 1 John 2:15, if that's okay. And it says, "Do not love the world nor the things of the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but it is from the world. And the world is passing away, and also its lusts. But the one who does the will of God lives forever." You don't get a better picture of why we are not supposed to blend in. If we absorb the things of the world, we're literally absorbing the very things that are the opposite of who God is. And so if I'm living like I have citizenship in God's kingdom, I'm living by those kingdom principles in this world. And so I shouldn't make sense to the world. I should look crazy sometimes. I should look like I'm making some weird calls on things, or, that I'm forgoing justice, or there should be moments when what I do makes people scratch their heads and go, how? Why would you do that? That should be what the people around me who don't know Christ, who are living in darkness with their eyes veiled, that should be their responses to how I'm living my life.
And yet all around us, we see that. I know there's the big movement to purge, to clean, to if it doesn't bring you joy, don't keep it. And what I find interesting in all that is that what we're reduced to? Are things really what it's about? And without looking at that, without really looking into ourselves, what do those things represent? It's not the thing. It's not the article, the item that you keep and you save and you put on your shelf. It's what you give away. It's what you give to others that really show who and what you are if you're living in the faith. And so I think that's what makes it so very difficult in today's world.
It truly is the overflow that really shows.
Yeah.
Because we can keep things hidden away pretty well. But when we look at the overflow, it tells where our heart is. Yeah. The overflow of our words, the overflow of our stuff.
Yeah.
Counselor, I think you could probably speak to the issue of hoarding. Because
it's never about the hoarding. There's usually some other things going on, and the hoarding is the outward symptom that just manifests. Most times there's something else going on underneath deeper.
We're hoarding things in our heart that maybe are too painful to look at, and so instead we do physically. What if we could just take that deeper look into our emotions through the eyes of a loving Savior, a loving Father who wants the very best for us? It could resolve so many things, our physical environment, but also the words of our mouth, the attitudes of our heart, the way we think about ourselves. What's in here what is at the very core of us is more important than any of us truly comprehend.
Well, and I just think about Jesus talking, and there's several places, Old and New Testament, that talk about Jesus saying, I desire, rather than the sacrifices, I desire the heart. And I don't have the correct wording on that, but like what he's talking about is it's not about you going through all of these actions of faith. It's about where your heart is underneath that, because those actions only get meaning if they come from a place that's real.
And I'm reminded of the book of Ruth. I mean, she leaves her home. She leaves what she knows. And that has to be a leap of faith. And she goes with her mother-in-law, and she's a foreigner. She's in a different place. She's in a place that she has no real knowledge of, the background, all of that. And yet, look at the fruit that she bears, and look at the result of that.
She verbed. She
did
yielded.
verb, and she did yield.
And she is in the genealogy of Christ.
Exactly.
God gave a
Right.
yield. That noun is so. We can go to the New Testament and see that noun.
And she never. I mean, would she have that? Would that have been what she would want for her life? Is that the path? And yet there are these women that take off and leave that and go towards the light, go towards God's will for them.
It's so interesting. Earlier this week, I told you about the author and speaker Cindy Wilkins from Canada. She's just very interesting to sit and talk with, but also to listen, speak, and she has a book. And anyway, you can learn more about her online. But one of the things she said to me as we were talking was that her life today, after having her limbs amputated, is just so much more than anything that it was before. She said, I was a businesswoman. I was leading teams. I was part of product development. She said, I was gone all the time. And she said, then this flesh-eating disease came into her life. Who knows how? She had a child that she did have at the hospital a lot, so it was probably, it's an infection. And her life turned upside down. But she said, now I get to be home with my kids, except when she's traveling and encouraging other people by the truth of God's word. And she said, I will tell you, my faith, it wasn't strong before all of this. She said, my husband is actually the one who at the hospital picked up a Gideon Bible and started reading and just knew that God was calling him to something bigger than he could see. And she said, he's the one who, after telling me, honey, we had to amputate your legs and your arms, but God's going to see us through. She said he led them spiritually. She said, that's not where we were before. We attended church, but we didn't fully depend on the Lord. So she said, all of this that I would have never chosen has produced something so much more, so much better in my life. Wait, what? Yeah. Fully relying on God, no matter what circumstance we are in, when we yield and say, Lord, this makes no sense to me. I don't even want to be here. When we yield and allow him to see us through that journey through the wilderness, there is an incredible yield. And yes, Connie, let's look at that book of Ruth to recognize that yielded heart. She went with her mother-in-law. She became a foreigner. She worked in the fields.
She went into a place where it was all men.
Right.
Uncovered a guy's feet and curled up to sleep. I'm sorry. That I'm not sure I could do that. That was pretty gutsy.
But she trusted the wisdom of her mother-in-law.
She did.
Right.
She did.
And knew that the result would be much greater than the pain or the suffering or leaving her homeland had been.
And
she knew that.
And she humbled herself.
And she humbled herself.
And that's really what it all comes back to in this world, that life isn't fair. I will never understand why cancer and death and You know, I don't want that for anyone that I love. It's not fair. Why do children suffer? Why is there abuse? Why? But you know what? This world is not our home. We're just a passing through. I think Psalm 23 speaks to this world that we live in. We are living in the valley of the shadow of death. But we can live and not fear evil, for God is with us. He is with us, and he has prepared not only a table, but mansions, we're told. Streets of gold.
Beth, just thinking, Beth, about just being in a dark spot and just feeling so alone. I want to read a passage out of Isaiah, and it's chapter 30, verse 18 through 21. It says, "Therefore the Lord longs to be gracious to you. Therefore he waits on high to have compassion on you. For the Lord is a God of justice. How blessed are those who long for him. O people in Zion, inhabitants of Jerusalem, you will weep no longer. He will surely be gracious to you at the sound of your cry. When he hears it, he will answer you. Although the Lord has given you bread of privation and water of oppression." So in other words, he's allowed suffering to come into your world. "He, your teacher, will no longer hide himself, but your eyes will behold your teacher, and your ears will hear a word behind you, saying, 'This is the way, walk in it,' and whenever you turn to the right or to the left." I love that. Mm-hmm. I love that. Mm-hmm. The fact that God will see and will allow us to see him in the middle of it, that we will hear him, a voice behind us saying, "This is the way, walk in it." That has been one of the most amazing verses in my world, because you have to be moving on that verse. You have to be walking. If you're sitting still, it's kind of hard to, come up to a place where God goes, "This is the way, walk in it." Mm-hmm. You kind of have to be on your way. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times when people get stuck, I will tell them, you need to do something. Mm-hmm. Just move and look for the doors that are open and listen for God to say, "This is the way, walk in it."
It's okay to slow down.
Yeah.
Right.
But don't get stuck.
Yeah.
Don't get stuck. Gwen, you told us the word world is on your radar this week because of the precept study. As I look at the book of 1 John, I see chapter 5, and it talks about overcoming the world. And I want to leave us with these verses today. "Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God, and everyone who loves the Father loves whoever has been born of him. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and obey his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. For everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. Who is it that overcomes the world except the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God?" We're back to that place of our faith. The woman with the hemorrhage, her faith healed her. Our faith. It's very personal, but it's not private. We live in this world, and we get to share our faith in the one true God with those that we're doing life with. You found a place to belong here in the circle of friends. This program was brought to you through the generous support of donors and listeners like you. To contact Circle of Friends Ministries, you can write to P.O. Box 345, Berlin, Ohio, 44610, or find us on Facebook at circleoffriends.fm. Program archives can be found at thelight959.com.
Looking for ways to change up your living space? Stop by Village Gift Barn and view our wide selection of house and home items. Need some tips on how to pull together a room? One of our talented home decor staff will help you put together the perfect arrangement for your home. Located in the heart of Amish country on State Route 39 in Berlin. Village Gift Barn. Never ordinary, we promise.